Poor Jimmy. True, it was a terrible night for women, children, and for the hundreds of thousands of hardworking immigrants who cut his lawn.
It was a terrible night for women, for children, for the hundreds of thousands of hardworking immigrants who make this country go, for healthcare, for our climate, for science, for journalism, for justice, for free speech. It was a terrible night for poor people, for the middle class, for seniors who rely on Social Security, for our allies in Ukraine.
Kimmel's a loser. I do Jimmy Kimmel. I did him a lot.
Yeah.
And he'd be standing on the sidewalk. Oh, sir, may I bring you in? He'd bring me in every time. The whole show is talking bad about Trump.
He called us doofuses when we had you on.
He's a group of doofuses in flat-brimmed hats.
Guess what? We
Ask
did
him how
5x
many.
what he did.
Ask him. Yeah, you do bigger. Yeah, you
Yeah.
do. He shows.
Jimmy Kimmel has just been hit with a huge $500 million lawsuit from Donald Trump, and Greg Gutfeld isn't ignoring it. He turned the entire situation into one of his sharpest on-air takedowns yet. During the segment, Gutfeld went straight at Kimmel's usual smug style, delivering jokes that were both ruthless and genuinely funny. This didn't feel like just another quick jab or late-night punchline. It came across more like a serious reality check. Anyone who thought Kimmel was untouchable when it comes to real criticism just got shown otherwise.
Incredibly brave to take this stance after you've made $300, $400 million not being woke, right? Loving Donald Trump, exploiting the mentally ill, wearing blackface. Look at the crop of woke comics, whether it's Stern or Jimmy Kimmel, his BFF, Sarah Silverman, Joy Behar, Michael Ian Black. What do they all have in common? They wore blackface. And then
Academy Awards, I said how he's the worst host in the history of the Academy Awards. And this stupid guy goes up, and just before the Best Picture of the Year, the show is almost over. They're waiting for the Best Picture of the Year. He gets up and he says, and his wife said, please don't do it. Please, darling, don't go out. His manager said, don't do it. I have to do it. He goes out and reads my truth to the entire audience right before the best prime time, the Best Picture. And it said basically, he is the worst host in the history. He reads the whole thing. And then I think he said something like, ha, ha, ha. He thinks he bothers me or some crap like that. I said, he's one of the dumbest human beings ever. He should have listened to his wife.
Greg didn't just tease Kimmel, he went all the way in. The jokes came fast, sharp, and perfectly timed, hitting one after another like clean punches. And with Trump now suing Kimmel for $500 million, the late-night host isn't just dealing with legal heat. He's also right in the center of a Greg monologue that held nothing back. Honestly, the whole thing landed harder than Kimmel's recent ratings.
And it was a terrible night for everyone who voted against him, and guess what? It was a bad night for everyone who voted for him, too. You just don't realize it yet.
You know what? If I ever cry on TV, it'll be because Maroon 5 put out a new song.
The show opened with real energy. Greg walked out wearing that familiar expression, the one that says he knows he's about to enjoy this. The headline of the night was Kimmel facing a $500 million lawsuit, and Greg didn't hesitate for a second. With the audience fully on his side, he jumped straight into the story, smiling like the class clown who just watched the teacher finally call someone else out. The irony was simply too good to pass up.
Just got a review, and has there ever been a worse host than Jimmy Kimmel at the Oscars? His opening was that of a less-than-average person trying too hard to be something which he is not and never can be. Get rid of Kimmel and perhaps replace him with another washed-up but cheap ABC talent, George Slopanopoulos.
In this story, Jimmy Kimmel comes off as both the class clown and the judge, while the principal is the one handing out a $500 million bill. You could hear the energy in Gutfeld's voice as he jumped right into the moment. He described Kimmel as someone trying to be a therapist, a preacher, and a comedian all at once, but not really mastering any of those roles.
The killer phrase was at the end when Kimmel said, you just don't realize it. Because you see, he's smarter than you, and he needs you to know that. And his ego can't bear that there's someone out there more famous and more influential than him. I got news for you, Kimmel. The last time you mattered, Bruce Jenner still had a penis.
Greg didn't hold back at all. He went straight after Kimmel's entire routine, saying the late-night host hides behind cue cards written by interns who probably get their news from TikTok. He took aim at what Kimmel has turned into, once a solid comic, now sounding more like a bitter spokesperson for self-righteous Hollywood. And with Trump's $500 million lawsuit now part of the story, Kimmel's image as the calm voice of reason in comedy suddenly feels as weak as a paper straw in the middle of a store.
Jimmy's career peaked with busty girls on trampolines. Now the only boob we see is him. He once co-hosted The Man Show. Now he's sobbing like he just watched Steel Magnolias 3 days into his menstrual cycle. Here's another morose multimillionaire.
Greg tore into the entire act. He pointed out how Jimmy Kimmel went from being the class clown to acting like judge, jury, and executioner, only to end up facing a lawsuit from the very person he spent years mocking. That's where Greg really leaned into the irony. He found it almost unbelievable that the guy who constantly lectures others about misinformation and abuse of power was now the one feeling the pressure. It felt like watching someone finally get hit with their own splashback. The joke had turned on the comedian himself. He didn't slow down either. Greg reminded viewers that Jimmy Kimmel had turned his show into a lecture hall for people wanting to feel morally superior. But now that so-called truth teller was dealing with a real courtroom situation, learning the hard way that even comedy can carry consequences. He joked that for years Kimmel's fans treated him like he was storming the beaches of Normandy, armed only with cue cards. And now their hero was stuck explaining why using jokes as weapons might come with real legal fallout involving Donald Trump.
I wonder who he thinks the people at fault are.
The people at fault are Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, Jill Biden, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, every elected member of Congress. The Democratic Party let that disaster happen. That is not a media failure. That is a Democratic Party failure. And only right-wing manufactured outrage who claims the media and the Democratic Party work as one have fused it into this.
Oh, I have a few names to add. CNN, MSNBC, CBS, the town crier.
Greg didn't spare Kimmel's audience either. Not the people there for a laugh, but the ones who cheer at anything anti-Trump like it's a standing ovation. He painted them as a nightly therapy session for folks who just want their political views validated by a man in a suit. And now, with the lawsuit hanging over Kimmel, that same crowd was nervously scrolling their phones, worried their favorite late-night comfort zone might be crumbling. Then Greg went even further, digging into Kimmel's past, especially his days on The Man Show. He reminded viewers that the guy now lecturing about morality once hosted bikini contests on national TV. The contrast was too striking to ignore, and in classic Greg fashion, he imagined the chaos behind the scenes. Kimmel flipping through legal papers, trying to reach a lawyer while eating quinoa, wondering if sarcasm could be a legal defense, or if crying on camera might save him. It was comedy aimed straight at the heart of Kimmel's carefully crafted public image.
Rex, because they believe the media. And yet, we're fine, because we weren't brainwashed. We know the media's job is to lie, to create anxiety out of proportion to the actual threat, or no threat at all. Journalists really only need to give you one tip to manage stress, and that's stop paying attention to journalists.
The audience couldn't stop laughing. Watching a self-righteous celebrity stumble never gets old. And Greg knew exactly how to land each joke. Then he took it further, imagining Kimmel actually showing up in court. No desk, no cheering crowd, no Twitter army to back him up. Just a guy standing in front of a judge, completely exposed, like an outdated rerun nobody asked for. Greg joked that maybe Jimmy would try tossing in a punchline or two, only to quickly realize that cue cards don't come with applause signs. Once you strip away the stage and cameras, all that's left is someone who thought he was untouchable, until Trump arrived with a $500 million reality check. Greg even laughed at how the media would spin it, turning the whole thing into yet another story blaming Trump, even when it was Kimmel tripping over his own words.
Watching Kimmel cry.
One of his tears fell out. Hold on. You know, it's funny how this derangement's working, because it only seems to work if you have a camera in front of him.
And just when it seemed like he was finished, Greg added the final twist, a fake dose of sympathy. He joked about Kimmel's finances, imagining the late-night host having to downgrade from his Malibu estate to, heaven forbid, a slightly smaller mansion. Maybe even sharing it with a roommate like Stephen Colbert, who could be next on Trump's list if the jokes keep coming. Greg even floated the idea of a fundraiser, Could Kimmel crowdsource his legal bills? Probably not, he said, unless he accepts donations in the form of angry tweets, gluten-free muffins, or NFTs of him crying on air. But Greg wasn't just joking, he was making a point. This isn't just any lawsuit, it's a public reminder that even the loudest voices on TV don't get a free pass forever. The guy who spent years acting untouchable just discovered that sometimes the audience pushes back, and sometimes that audience wears a red tie and carries a court order.
Is ripe for mockery and ridicule and even gentle humor if you like him. I mean, just Hunter Biden alone, just in the recent stuff, I mean, you could go on forever. But Kimmel has abdicated his role of a comedian. He's now just a political hack, which I'm grateful for, because then I get the turf to myself. I'm not a comedian, but I just filled the gap. That's why I'm beating him every night, because he sat there with that guy and basically he spoon-fed him like he was a dementia patient.
Greg then wondered out loud what would happen if Kimmel tried to play the victim, the shaky voice, the dramatic pauses, maybe even a few tears for the camera. But Greg wasn't buying it. No amount of emotional acting could erase years of smug lectures delivered with a smile and a laugh track. For years, Kimmel had used his show to cast himself as some kind of moral authority. But now, he's finally in the hot seat, and the scoreboard isn't looking good for him. Then came the punch that hit hardest. Greg pointed out what probably stings the most. Donald Trump is the main character in Jimmy Kimmel's career. The man who's lived rent-free in Kimmel's head for years just served him a notice, and it came with a lawsuit big enough to rattle a country's budget. For Greg, that moment, that realization, was the sweet spot. The guy Kimmel spent years mocking is now the reason people are still talking about him.
Last night was the 96th Academy Awards show, and while you might have missed it, there was one clear winner. No, not Oppenheimer. It was sanctimonious leftists for their lead role in pretending they are better than you. Winner number one, Jimmy Kimmel. For the fourth time, Kimmel hosted the Oscars before an adoring crowd of Hollywood stars who laughed and curried favor with the man who wore blackface so many times.
No matter how many jokes Kimmel made, Greg pointed out, he was never the one steering the narrative. Trump was, still is, and probably always will be. With a single legal signature, Trump reminded everyone who really moves the needle. Greg didn't just celebrate it, he revealed it like a magician finishing a trick. He didn't gloat, he demolished. He held up a mirror to Hollywood and let the truth speak for itself. The fake morality, the ego, the double standards, all of it collapsed under the weight of a $500 million lawsuit. And Kimmel? He wasn't just roasted. He was served medium rare, with court papers on the side and a heavy helping of poetic justice. As the audience laughed, Greg stepped back like a chef admiring the meal he just cooked. His final point was clear. Comedy isn't above consequences. If you build your career on mocking others, don't act surprised when the joke finally turns on you. Greg didn't just take Kimmel down. He turned the entire moment into a legal punchline America couldn't stop laughing at.
I want to suggest that Kimmel's show has become boring and predictable, but last night during the taping, people in the studio audience were changing the channel. And that's your 7 joke.
And somewhere in Malibu, probably surrounded by stress and scented candles, Jimmy Kimmel was likely prepping his next monologue. Not in front of a mirror, but in front of his legal team. This wasn't just another lawsuit. For Kimmel, it felt personal. A wake-up call. The kind of reality check that makes you stop and wonder how many bad jokes it took to end up here. Greg leaned into that idea, savoring every bit of it. He pictured Jimmy alone, scrolling through old clips, slowly realizing he may have mistaken applause for meaning and moral grandstanding for actual substance. Then Greg imagined what Kimmel's next show might look like. If it even happens. The forced laughter, the awkward jokes, the tension you can't joke your way out of. And with that, Greg let the moment breathe. No need to oversell it. Sometimes the truth, delivered with a smirk, hits harder than any punchline. And when Greg is the one smirking, you know the roast isn't over yet, it's just starting to sizzle.